Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and today I am bringing you an Exposed Investigate series episode. And I'm going to take you on a deep dive into a very recent investigation. This thing is only about a week old from the time that I'm recording this, and it's an investigation into the death of Brianna Aguilera. So let's start by telling you a little about Brianna. Now, she was 19 years old and a Texas A&M yell leader. Now, they don't have cheerleaders at Texas A&M, and I came across several articles when this was first reported saying she was a Texas A&M cheerleader. There's a big difference between yell leaders and cheerleaders. They don't even have cheerleaders at Texas A&M. They're just known as yell leaders. They're leaders of the student body, if you will, that just go crazy at these games and cheer for the Texas A&M Aggie. Now, Brianna was found unresponsive after a tailgate. She was at a West Campus apartment complex at the University of Texas A&M, and these apartments are high-rise apartments, very high-rise apartments, like 20-plus floors. And after all the smoke cleared, Austin police determined she jumped from the 17th story to her death. Now, Brianna was a sophomore studying at Bush School of Government. She aspired to be a lawyer someday, and she was also a member of the Texas A&M's pre-law society. So she had a ton going for her. As a matter of fact, Brianna was very smart, just 1 year shy of earning her Aggie ring, as they call it. And that's a ring that students earn after completing 90 hours of classes. Now, keep in mind, this girl was only 19 years old and had already completed 90 hours of classes. She was almost set to graduate. Now, she was originally from Laredo, Texas, where she was a cheerleader at United High School. And she was what you would picture a cheerleader to be, just a beautiful young lady. So to take you through the hours preceding her death, Brianna makes a 5-hour trip from College Station, where Texas A&M is, to Laredo, and she's spending Thanksgiving with her mother, Stephanie, and her 2 young brothers. And she took her 2 young brothers, as a matter of fact, while she was there for Thanksgiving, to go see Wicked before she makes the drive back to Central Texas. Texas A&M was playing Texas University, biggest game of the season for those teams. She was, of course, going to be there. She had plans to tailgate with friends, and then she was going to spend the night in Austin at a friend's apartment in the 21 Rio high-rise just off the west side of campus. Now, we know that her mother, Stephanie Rodriguez, and Brianna were very, very close. As a matter of fact, the day of her death, or the evening of her death, they had been texting all day long. And as I said, this girl was an honor student at Texas A&M, and that's important. That plays a role in this. She's only 19 years old. She had so much going for her, as a matter of fact, that she was about to take the LSAT, which is the law school SAT test. You have to take that to get accepted to law school. And as I said, she's about to graduate. This girl had her whole life in front of her, and she was absolutely killing it. Now, hours into the tailgate, according to her mother, she was trying to reach Brianna for hours, sending her texts. They would go unanswered, etc. She eventually uses Life 360 or a similar app to look for her phone. She sees that her phone is in some sort of lake area or river area, riverbed area, not where it should be, right? She freaks out. She calls the police and she says, "Hey, I want to do like a missing persons. I hadn't talked to my daughter in hours. This is not like her." And her phone is in a very kind of secluded area. And the police tell her, hey, she's got to be gone for 24 hours before we'll even investigate it. This incident took place on November 29th, just literally a week ago. And in really quick order, I mean, within several hours, police came out and they basically said there was no foul play expected in this and that they were not investigating this case as a homicide. So, look, the hardest thing to accept when someone close to you takes their own life is the fact that they did it. It's just the acceptance of that. But in this case, there were a lot of questions that seemed like legitimate questions. And Brianna's mother, she was having none of it. And on December 1st, she posted this Facebook post shortly after police determined there was no foul play in the death of her daughter. It reads, quote, "This was not accidental. Someone killed my Bree," and gave all the group of friends a lot of time to come up with the same story. My daughter would not jump 17 stories from a building, and to be labeling this as a suicide is insane. Quote, "My daughter loved life and was excited to graduate and pursue her career in law. Austin PD and Detective Marshall is not doing his job. How is it that certain friends left immediately and the person who was living at the apartment complex vacated her apartment ASAP?" So let's take the accidental fall theory first. And we have the benefit of her mother posting a picture on Facebook. And in the background, I don't know if this was taken the same day or when this was taken, but it was from the same balcony that was on that 17th floor where Brianna allegedly jumped off, and we'll get into that. But the picture says a lot because her daughter was 5'2", and the railing in this picture from that balcony is nearly 4 feet high. So right off the bat, you can take the theory that she accidentally fell off of that balcony because there's simply no way when you're 5'2", you can accidentally fall off of a railing of a building that is 44 inches high. It's impossible. You can't slip and fall off of the freaking balcony. So right off the bat, that theory, accidental, there's just no way that can happen. So the only other two possibilities are left is someone threw her off the balcony or she jumped off the balcony. And that would be kind of hard to do. You got to climb over the balcony railing, but it's not impossible. I mean, if she wanted to get off of that balcony, she could have boosted herself up or pulled herself up. You could do that in theory if you were wanting to end your life. So police investigate this, and very quickly, too quickly, in my opinion, they come up with a determination, and they air, if you will, they voice this investigation determination at a press conference, and they give their narrative and the results of that investigation. So I'm going to play you that in its entirety. It's about 15 minutes in length, and then we'll talk about it.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. First, I want to offer my deepest condolences to Brianna Aguilera's family, friends, and loved ones. I stand before you as the chief of police, but first and foremost as a mother. I have 3 daughters and a son, and I cannot begin to imagine the pain that Brianna's family is feeling. As a parent, none of us want to contemplate the loss of a child, and again, my heart aches for them. Before I turn this over to our lead detective, I want to be clear about a few things. It is not common for a police department to speak publicly about a death by suicide. But inaccurate information has circulated and been reported. And that has led to additional harm of innocent people, bullying included, and their families. There have also been statements suggesting the police have failed to do our jobs. Those statements are not accurate. I understand how grief and the need for answers can raise intense emotions and many questions. But sometimes the truth doesn't provide the answers we are hoping for, and that is this case. Please know that careful investigations take time. We must interview witnesses, collect evidence, and piece together facts. Releasing partial information too early can jeopardize the integrity of that case. I want to assure everyone that our team worked around the clock. These guys do not sleep. They worked around the clock on this case. And many of them are parents themselves. We used every available resource, interviewed numerous people, gathered evidence, because we too want to understand what happened to Brianna, who was clearly loved by so many. I want to thank our homicide unit and victim services for their thorough work on this investigation and providing support for everyone that has been involved. I'm now going to turn it over to Detective Marshall, who will walk us through the timeline.
Morning. First, I'd like to start off by saying that our deepest sympathies and condolences go out to Brianna and her family. During this investigation, I've had a chance to speak with numerous members of her family and friend group, both here in Austin and College Station and in Laredo. All of them, it's completely apparent that she was very much loved. Every friend and witness during this investigation has been nothing but forthcoming and open during the entire time I've spoken with them. I've been in contact with dozens of people over the past week, and every single one of them has answered my calls, my text, submitted to interviews, and helped give answers from the moment that I've asked for that help. This also includes several people submitting to second interviews freely and without hesitation. The location this happened at, the 21 Rio Apartments, have also been helpful since the very beginning of this investigation. They've allowed us around-the-clock access to the apartment which Brianna was last seen at, as well as access to their internal camera system, which has been very beneficial in establishing a timeline of that evening's events. On Saturday, November 29th, at approximately 12:46 a.m., the Austin police officers responded to a call of a deceased person located at 2101 Rio Grande Street. The decedent, later identified as Brianna Aguilera, was located on the ground with trauma consistent to having fallen from a higher floor. Brianna was pronounced deceased at 12:56 a.m. I, along with crime scene specialists, responded to process the scene and interview witnesses. A witness informed officers that they had heard a sound of a thud and then observed a female on the ground. Initially, it was unknown who the decedent was and on what floor she had fallen. The medical examiner arrived on scene, and the body was taken to the medical examiner's office, where she was later positively identified. In the meantime, I was able to contact one of the employees at the 21 Rio Apartments at approximately 6 a.m. that same morning. The staff at 21 Rio were cooperative throughout this entire investigation. By approximately 10 a.m., we were able to access the camera's system inside the apartment complex just after 11 p.m. on Friday, November 28th, and that she went into a specific apartment on the 17th floor. Video surveillance has confirmed that a large group of friends left that same apartment at 12:30 a.m. on November 29th, leaving just Brianna and 3 other girls in the apartment. Now, on Saturday, November 29th, at approximately 12:54 p.m., I, along with patrol officers, made contact with the residents of that specific apartment that Brianna had been observed going into. The residents informed me that they were trying to report that their friend Brianna was missing. I was able later to confirm they had in fact placed a 911 call at 12:14 p.m. earlier that afternoon to report their friend Brianna was missing. They informed me that they were hosting friends for the Texas A&M football game and that Brianna was supposed to be staying there that preceding evening. I spoke with 3 different female witnesses on scene, as well as later a 4th witness who had left earlier that morning. The investigation showed that Brianna had been at a tailgate party earlier in the day and became intoxicated to a point that she was asked to leave the same tailgate. She had told her friends that she had lost her phone at some point near that tailgate. They had all returned to the apartment where Brianna borrowed a phone of a friend to call an out-of-town boyfriend. Witnesses heard Brianna arguing on the phone with her boyfriend, which was also confirmed later by the boyfriend. Phones from both the phone Brianna used and the boyfriend's phone have confirmed through call logs that call did occur. Now, this call occurred at approximately 12:43 to 12:44 a.m., approximately 1 minute. This is 2 minutes before the 911 call of the body found down below on the pavement. On Saturday, November 29th, it was found that Brianna's mother, Stephanie Rodriguez, had called the Austin Police Department at 12:50 p.m. This was in an attempt to locate Brianna. Rodriguez called back an hour later at 2 p.m. stating the location of her daughter's missing phone. The phone was located by Austin police officers in a wooded area by 3:30 p.m. that afternoon near Walnut Creek in a field by the Austin Rugby Club. Through this investigation, it was found that Brianna had attended the tailgate on Friday, November 28th at the Austin Rugby Club, arriving between 4 and 5 p.m. and then leaving at approximately 10 p.m. Witnesses stated that after Brianna was asked to leave the tailgate, she had repeatedly dropped her phone and staggered into a nearby wooded area where her phone and other items were later located by Austin police. Just after 4 p.m. on Saturday, November 29th, officers from the scene paged homicide to inform them that they had located the property belonging to Brianna and determined that there was also a separate deceased person call with the same name. Rodriguez was notified of Brianna's death just before 5 p.m. Brianna's phone was placed with the rest of her property still on the 17th floor of the apartment for her family to later receive. On Monday, December 1st, the mother and father of Brianna met with victim services and those of us in the homicide office at police headquarters. There, Rodriguez turned over Brianna's phone and gave it back to us. A further review of Brianna's phone shows a deleted digital suicide note dated Tuesday, November 25th, which was written to specific people in her life. From the moment this call originated up until now, between all of the witness statements, all of the video evidence, and all of the digital evidence collected, at no time did any evidence point to this being anything of a criminal nature. Rather, our investigation has revealed that unfortunately Brianna had made suicidal comments previously to friends back in October of this year. This continued through the evening of her death with some self-harming actions earlier in the evening and a text message to another friend indicating the thought of suicide. We recognize that hearing news like this can be difficult and may affect members of the community in very personal ways. If you or someone you know is experiencing emotional distress or mental health struggles, support is available. You can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or contact Integral Care's 24-hour helpline at 512-472-HELP. That's 512-472-4357 to be connected with local crisis services, including mobile response teams. No one should have to navigate these kind of crises alone. Any questions?
Now open it up for questions.
Oh, you want us to pick?
Jobs. Go ahead, Brianna.
Couple things. Was the mom made aware of these previous suicidal comments when you guys figured that out during the investigation? And I know a big part of this is trying to address some online speculation, so just wanted to bring up something that people have brought up about concerns about fights that Brianna may have gotten in with other people in that apartment. Can you address those?
Sure. The first part first. I was in contact with Brianna's mother beginning Saturday afternoon. We spoke through Sunday and Monday through the meeting here. Since then, I've attempted 4 times to contact her. I wanted to share this information privately. She did not reply to any of my attempts to talk to her until yesterday afternoon, where she asked me to talk to her lawyer. So I have not been in contact with her mother. However, her father I have been in contact with. He knows all of this information as of yesterday. And then secondly, the fight.
Yeah.
There have been online reports of a fight. The only evidence that we have of any kind of physical altercation was Brianna punching one of her friends as they tried to help her out of the party. We have no evidence of any other altercation.
Go ahead,
Did the witnesses that y'all talked to give any reason why they didn't call 911 earlier? That night?
So most of those witnesses, between the time of night that it was, they slept for some periods of time. They do have some text messages. They were worried. They assumed, because so many friends from their hometown were here in Austin staying at different locations, they had assumed she probably just went back out with another friend group that was in the immediate area, and nobody had any idea.
Did anyone watch her go over the balcony?
No, ma'am. No, we have no evidence to suggest that.
Can you share more about that deleted note that you mentioned? When was that deleted, and do you have information about how that was deleted?
So that phone is currently with our digital forensics units to be processed. It is being processed as of last night. I just know the date of it. I don't know exactly when it was typed, but I found it in the deleted items folder, and that's about all I can say at this point.
The date from the deleted item was from November the 25th. So it appears that's when it was written.
Brianna?
In the absence of the chatter that happened online about this, how would you have handled this investigation?
I hated the chatter probably as much as her family and everybody, and the living witnesses hate it. The problem is I can't make a public statement until I interview everyone, and several of these people we had interviewed 2 times. Video takes hours and hours, not only to get, but then to go through and process and look at. Her phone takes hours to go through. I've never been a part of an investigation that's happened as fast as I wanted to. We always wanted to go faster, but in this case, so many people knew her, so many people wanted to help us. Just to dig through all that information, unfortunately, it has taken 3 or 4 days.
How certain would you say y'all are, sorry to raise my hand, certain y'all are in this determination?
Just every investigation, we have to rely on the evidence, and all evidence in this case is indicative of suicide.
Can you share a little bit more about who was inside the apartment at the time that she fell, and were you able to speak with all of those people?
I won't share their names, obviously. Yes, I've been able to speak with every single person in there, all of them multiple times, actually, throughout this. They were just all friends. Again, this is all a large friend group from Laredo.
Is there anything that you can share about what she was last seen wearing? I've heard from a couple of people that they were questioning some of the wardrobe that was seen after the fact.
I'll speak to that. She was found wearing the same stuff she was wearing at the tailgate. Part of the reason it took 4 hours for the video surveillance, she was wearing something slightly different when she arrived back at the apartment. So that kind of threw things off to actually locate her. But she was wearing the exact same stuff from early in the evening.
It took a bit, I would say, to notify the mom. Was that because they'll have to go through me and do the identification, or what's that?
Sure. Yeah, it took a while to positively identify her, but on top of that, as Detective Marshall had mentioned, about around 2 p.m. on that Saturday is when they'd actually set the gears in motion to try to notify her. So she had called about 12:50, and she was notified that same afternoon.
We'll take 2 more questions.
You mentioned an argument with her boyfriend before her death. How soon did that happen before her death, and were you able to make contact with him as well?
So I have spoken with him multiple times. That phone call happened approximately 2 minutes before the 911 call of her reporting her on the sidewalk.
Part of her mom's questioning is that you talked to friends or people that were in the apartment till Sunday. Maybe you said it at the timeline. Can you tell us again when you started talking to people?
We first identified the apartment very late morning, early afternoon on Saturday. We talked to them immediately that very same time. And like I said, since then we've spoken multiple times to everyone that was in the apartment.
Go ahead. A little bit different of a question, but she is 19 and underage. Are any people, just got asked, any people being investigated for supplying the alcohol to her?
That would be a better question for Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission, TABC. I've been in very brief contact with them, but I don't know the status of it.
So let's unpack quickly what we just heard. The police version of this and their, I don't know if I call it allegations, but their results as far as what they came up with in that investigation. And the first thing I want to say is, wow, that chief of police was very defensive. I mean, she offers condolences, but in a very dry manner. She came off very defensive. I found it very insensitive to the family. It was just the tone of the entire press conference, but especially as it relates to the chief, was not right. Now, as it relates to some of the things we found out in that press conference from the police, I have a major issue with her friends reporting Brianna missing around 12:15 p.m. the next day. You have all this activity. A body has been found at the bottom of this apartment complex. There's police everywhere, ambulances everywhere, I'm sure, that morning. And your claim was you had no idea where Brianna was, but you did find the need to call 911 and let them know she was missing at 12:15 p.m. That's just kind of weird to me. Like, nobody woke up, and, you know, news travels fast, especially among like college dormitories like this. I don't care how many stories it is. News travels fast. Nobody said, oh my God, a girl jumped off a balcony this morning, or they found somebody dead on, you know, concrete at the bottom of this college dormitory. It's just bizarre to me. And then when you notice she's missing, you don't call around to a bunch of other friends that aren't in the building with you. The first thing you do is call police. Seems kind of weird too. I mean, she could have just got up and left the apartment and no one knew. Why would they not call her parents or call some of her friends that weren't at the apartment and say, hey, did Brianna talk to you this morning? She's not here. I find that very weird. They also discussed a little bit about the mother pinging her daughter's phone, if you will, pulling up the app, finding out where her daughter's phone was located, and it was found by a creek. They mentioned that. They also brought up that Brianna was supposedly inebriated. There's no toxicology report, though, yet. And she may have, in fact, been inebriated. And maybe they interviewed some people and they said, oh, yeah, she was drunk, all those sorts of things. 19-year-old college students, right? But you still are going out on the record saying this before you even have those results back. Kind of weird. They mentioned a suicide note that was found, and more on that later. They mentioned they found that on a computer and it had been deleted, but you're going to find out some information as we go along on that whole deal that kind of blows that up. And they mentioned that she had suicidal comments preceding her death when they interviewed friends, and you're going to find out more on that later as well that may blow up that theory. They also mentioned she had an argument with her boyfriend, but they didn't really go into detail on it. I mean, what did she say during that argument? That's important. Did it spur this? Did she say, I'm going to jump off this building as soon as I get off the phone with you? We don't know. They didn't say anything about that. It leads me to believe that that comment wasn't made because I think if they're trying to prove their case, if you will, that she did commit suicide and she said something like that to her boyfriend, they would have mentioned 2 minutes before she jumped off the building, she told her boyfriend she was jumping off the building. That never came up. And incidentally, in fact, 2 minutes before she jumped, she used her friend's phone, and we'll get into that in just a minute. And I want to say allegedly jumped. So a lot of questions, even though they held this press conference and made this determination that she had indeed took her own life. Now, this press conference with the police took place on December 4th. And then on December 5th, the very next day, we discover via the family's press conference that they have hired none other than super attorney, if you will, Tony Busby. Now, the same Tony Busby that has 100 plus lawsuits against Diddy. And I've told you plenty about Tony Busby. So if you're curious about who he is as an attorney, go back and listen to, conglomerate of episodes on this feed. But he is based out of Texas and he holds a press conference and he brings up a whole nother point of view. So I want you to hear that. And you'll also hear from the mother for the first time in this press conference. So here's that, and then we'll talk about it.
I want to introduce you all to Stephanie Rodriguez.
Hello.
And Manuel Aguilera. Now, I saw on social media some comments about the lawyers that are involved here. One recurring comment was, he gets paid either way. I want to make sure we're clear on something. We don't get paid either way. We're doing this for reasons more than money. This family lost their daughter the day after Thanksgiving, mere weeks before Christmas. Brianna was a girl who had the world at her feet. Her whole life was in front of her. She was a girl with big plans and big dreams. She was an honor student, a former cheerleader, a proud sophomore at my alma mater, Texas A&M. She was a political science major and wanted to be a future lawyer. I just found out from her mother that the last time I spoke to the Pre-Law Society at Texas A&M, Brianna was in the audience. We refuse to believe that this young woman committed suicide. Why? Because she was not suicidal. Contrary to what has been sloppily reported, in many cases by a lot of the people here, she did not engage in self-harm. She had never tried to hurt herself before. So why are these groups of lawyers engaged in this? Because this family wants the truth. They're entitled to the truth. We were asked by these parents who love their daughter to find the truth of what happened to her. They didn't feel like they were getting thorough information from the Austin Police Department. And despite what the detective said yesterday, or maybe implied yesterday, it's kind of hard to figure out what he was saying, this is very much an ongoing investigation. I've been around a long time. Good investigations lead to conclusions. Bad investigations start with a conclusion, and then they try to support the conclusion through the investigation. It's clear to me, based on what this detective and the things that he said to Stephanie, it's clear to me that he had made a decision immediately about what his conclusion was and then went about trying to support it. The Austin Police Department formed a conclusion within hours of this tragedy that this was a suicide without any investigation. This family had a horrible tragedy, and the communication from the Austin Police Department was so bad that the family became concerned enough to engage me and my colleagues at Gamez Law. And they also asked the public for help. With proper communication, this matter would be treated like most investigations, where no information is shared until actually after the investigation is complete. But what did we see yesterday? What we saw yesterday was a hurried, rushed press conference. And I think we all can agree the reason they had a press conference yesterday is because they knew that we were going to have this conference today. They gave the family no notice of the press conference. They sent 2 emails, and then the detective went on camera in front of millions of people and told everybody that this young lady committed suicide. Ironically, the same thing he told Stephanie, the mother, within a few minutes of talking to her, without any investigation. That's not the way it's supposed to be done. The family had dared to ask questions about what was going on and what had been learned by the investigation, was then punished with leaks to millions of people from the Austin Police Department, to the detriment of their daughter and to their daughter's memory. So we were hired to assist this family in finding the truth, and we've been doing that. But everyone knows that investigations are supposed to remain confidential until the investigation is complete. And why is that? That's because you don't want to tamper with potential witnesses or scare off witnesses or create a false narrative or color witnesses' interpretation of the facts. Everything that detective did yesterday, that's exactly what he did. Do you realize that the autopsy has not been completed? Now, I want you to let that soak in for a minute. The autopsy has not been completed. The medical examiner's office told us that it will not be completed for 60 to 90 days, yet you had the so-called lead detective in front of millions of people saying that he had concluded that this was a suicide. Now, how unprofessional is that? The police department asked the medical examiner to do a toxicology report. We don't have the results of that toxicology report, yet this investigator stood in front of all of you and said that he had concluded this was a suicide, even though by law he doesn't have the authority to make that conclusion. Only the medical examiner has that authority. The police department also asked for a rape kit to be done. They admitted to us yesterday in a Zoom call that, well, if they do the rape kit, we don't even know where they're going to send it to. This is what we're dealing with, and that's the reason we're involved. It's like the Keystone Cops over there in Austin. And it's incredibly frustrating to this family. Why would the Austin Police Department hurriedly perform or set up a press conference and leak details of the investigation and suggest to you that there was a suicide note without the medical examiner ever even performing their job? Why would they do that? Now, what he told us, I'll tell you what the investigator told us. He said, oh, my goodness gracious, the witnesses are getting death threats. I said, from whom? Why? No answer, because it's foolishness, absolute foolishness. And it's that kind of conduct that caused the family to try to find somebody separate from the Austin Police Department to investigate this. We don't have a toxicology report. We don't have a rape report. We don't have a cause of death. And none of those things, don't put that on top of that, none of those are conclusions that a police detective, a corporal, can make. He doesn't have the statutory authority to determine the cause of death. And I'm surprised that none of you even asked that question. He gave you an opportunity to ask questions. Not one of you said, hey, wait a minute, detective. When did the state of Texas give you the legislative authority to determine cause of death? I thought only either a JP, if there's no medical examiner, or a medical examiner could do that. Is that what the medical examiner has done? He would have said to you, no, actually, the medical examiner hasn't even completed his autopsy. But none of you asked that question. You just bought everything that he said, hook, line, and sinker. And then you published your most of the things that I saw on Instagram and the newspaper were cause of death determined. Young lady committed suicide. That's irresponsible. That's irresponsible. You should not do that. You should say, wait a minute, detective. How many times have you been written up and reprimanded? Detective. Wait a minute, when did you have the statutory authority, detective, to determine cause of death? Detective. That's your job. Now it's my job. The public dissemination of information by the Austin Police Department during an investigation, the way it was done yesterday, is unethical, unprofessional, and incredibly damaging to an objective, unbiased investigation. And it's also damaging to the memory of this child. All this family is asking for is a thorough, complete, unbiased, open-minded investigation. That's all they're asking for. That's what any parent would ask for whose child went to college, went to a game, lost her for several hours, and then find out hours and hours later that she supposedly jumped off a balcony. And with just a few questions, a few pointed questions, quickly figure out that these investigators, this so-called investigator, did not know what he was talking about. We're going to get into that. You can't close a case before you even have the cause of death from the medical examiner. Period. Full stop. You don't have that right. You don't have that authority. We have to get this right. This is not just for this family. This is for any family. You have to get this right. You can't close a book in the middle of reading a chapter and say that that's closed and it's over. That's not how it works. You can't misclassify a death like this. When you misclassify a death, you're planting a lie in the soil where truth should grow. And as I said, to her credit, Stephanie Rodriguez was very close to her daughter, very close. Talked to her daily. Knew everything that she was up to, everything that she was doing. The very first interaction she had with the detective from the Austin Police Department, he told her your daughter committed suicide. The very first reaction, the very first interaction. At that point, he hadn't talked to one witness, he hadn't seen her phone, he hadn't done anything. That's sloppy and irresponsible. He claims she made suicidal comments. He told us in the Zoom call she made suicidal comments. You know what he was talking about? The other day, when I was talking to a friend the other day, I said, man, you're going to make me jump off a bridge. That's what he's talking about. Silliness like that. He later claimed she was making those kinds of statements on the day or the night that she died. If that's the case, why did her friends leave her out on the balcony by herself? If that's true, because it's not true. None of the things that we've been told by the Austin Police Department are consistent with the actual facts that we've learned. The detective was talking about suicide before he was ever given her phone. Then he gets into her phone and he sees an essay that she wrote and he calls it a suicide note. She took creative writing the semester before. Now, I don't know what the purpose of that. We'll never know what the purpose of what she wrote and deleted, but this is the suggestion was that she left a quote suicide note. Total malarkey. Total malarkey. It was something she wrote on the 25th. She talked to her mother on the 25th. She was with her boyfriend on the night of the 25th. She was talking to her mother every single day after that. We see pictures of her smiling. We see pictures of her having fun. We see pictures of her partying. Total baloney, what they're trying to sell to you. And why? Am I suggesting that there's some kind of conspiracy? No, I'm suggesting they're lazy and they're incompetent. Just so I'm clear. I'm not suggesting any sort of conspiracy that there's some kind of somebody in power that wants this to go. No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that there's incompetence and laziness on the part of the detective. That's what I'm suggesting. The suggestion they've made is she wrote an essay, because it's not a note. She wrote an essay on the 25th that she deleted, and then she goes and kills herself 4 days later. This is their logic. It's really ridiculous. So, a few things they didn't bother to even explain. I don't even know what they did, honestly. I know what we've done. We sent someone to the apartment. We had someone take the dimensions of the apartment. We had somebody measure the railing and the height of the railing. We know how tall Brianna was. She was 5'2". The railing's 44 inches. You don't fall over it. There's no furniture out in the balcony. There's nothing to climb up on, to jump off. Anyone that's on that little balcony, it's literally as big as this. It's a little bitty old balcony. And there's a window just like that you can see onto the balcony. The apartment is like a dorm. It's very small. There's no way you can be in that apartment and hide. If you're in the apartment, people know you're in the apartment. It's a little small apartment. No offense to the apartment complex, but that's what it is. It's like a little double-room dorm with a small balcony with no furniture. These are easy things to find out. Things that you would say, wait a minute, you're saying that this young lady was out on the balcony and she was 5'2", she had to somehow climb over the railing to try to kill herself? Then certainly you guys could see that. Certainly you knew that was happening. How could that possibly be? It doesn't make any sense because it didn't happen that way. She was 100 pounds, 5'2". There's no way she could fall over that railing accidentally. There's no way to be on the balcony and you be inside and not know somebody's on the balcony. It's not possible. It's almost impossible to be inside the apartment and not know somebody's in the apartment with you, even though there's 2 little bedrooms. This is called common sense. I'll tell you what's most concerning. They didn't explore the fight that Brianna apparently had with somebody at the tailgate at the Austin Rugby Club. I think she went to, what was the name of the tailgate that they had there? Some student organization.
The Latin Economic Business Development.
Latin Economic Business Development tailgate at the Austin Rugby Club. There was an altercation between her and another female. No investigation of that. Turns out that other female was in the apartment with her that night. There was a witness between 12:30 and 1 a.m. who posted on TikTok. Many of you have seen it. Young man posted on TikTok that he could hear up above at around the 17th floor in that general area fighting, screaming. Somebody saying, "Get off of me!" And then a muffled sound. He posted it, got many, many views. You can get on TikTok and look at it now. We talked to him this morning. Guess what? Here's the irony. Or maybe here's the tragedy. The police didn't bother to talk to him. Now, why wouldn't they talk to him? He had incredibly specific information about what he heard. He could hear it loud enough. He could hear the words that were spoken. "Get off of me," and screaming. And then a muffled cry between 12:30 and 1 p.m. right next to the apartment. We had an expert say, wait a minute, could he hear that? We had to engage an expert to say, is it possible that he could actually hear that? The expert said, absolutely. Absolutely could hear that. It makes a lot of sense. Never talked to by the police. We have a witness who was in the apartment across from the apartment where this apparently occurred, who could hear running back and forth and screaming. And then she said, I could tell something bad had happened. Did y'all know this? Ridiculous. Her entire family was in the apartment. The police could have talked to her and several other people. They failed to look into the anonymous message that was sent. There was an anonymous message that was posted that said, hey, I have specific information that this young lady was locked out on the balcony. Did you know that? It's not part of the investigation. Why is it not part of the investigation? Because they made their decision literally within minutes. Within minutes. Now here's where it gets a little dicey, and here's where I'm having, and I want to be very careful because I don't want to be accusing anybody, because I'm not accusing anybody other than the APD, the Austin Police Department, not doing its job. At first we were told that she jumped from the balcony and the three young women that were in the apartment, and we're talking about, as I said, a tiny little apartment, were asleep and didn't know where she was. That's what we were told first. That they were asleep. They didn't even know she was on the balcony. They didn't know where she was. And that's the reason why they didn't call the police until 12:15 the next day. That's what we were told. That's part of the cops' timeline. Okay? Put up the timeline, Ryan. They said, according to the plot, we haven't talked to them, who were in the apartment, three of them, one of which was the lessor or the lessee of the apartment, who vacated the apartment the very next day and never went back. Did you know that? This is the timeline that the police gave us yesterday. This is the timeline. And if you can't look at that timeline in 1 second, point out the problem of that timeline, then you're not doing your job. We'll get to it. So at first we're told that the three women didn't know where she was and they were asleep. That's what we were told. And that they didn't know where she was, they were looking for her, and they were texting her mom, and it wasn't, and they decided about 12:14 the next day, 6 hours later almost, that they decided at that point they couldn't find her, so they were going to call the police. This is what we were told by the Austin Police Department. Lay aside what was heard happening at about 12:30 to 1 o'clock that night. Lay aside what the witness across the hall said. Lay aside what the man down on the street said. Just disregard all that. This is what the police say. It must be right, according to them, because they did such a thorough investigation. This is what they gave us. Not one of you have asked a question about it. Not one of you. But this is what they said. Her friends called the police at 12:14 the next day because they didn't know where she was. They hadn't seen her. They thought maybe she had went out. That's what they said. Keep that in your mind. When I asked the police that, like, wait a minute, how is that possible? How is that possible? A whole group of 14 or so people came into the apartment that night after they'd been out partying. They got there about 11 or so. Everybody left. Right? That's what they say. and it left just 4 girls there, 4 young women, right? And the 4 young women, 3 of them didn't call the police till 12 o'clock the next day because they didn't know where she was. That's what the police say. Lay aside what the witnesses have said about that and lay aside the fact that that's a really small apartment. It's hard to get lost in that little small apartment. I want you to look very carefully. The first entry on the timeline. According to the police, let me walk over there. Excuse me. Brianna did not have her phone. She didn't have her phone, so she had to call. To make a call, according to the police, she borrowed her friend's phone, meaning one of the 3 women that was in the apartment. Now look at this very carefully. According to the police, she borrowed a friend's phone and made a call from 12:43, and it lasted 1 minute. At 12:46, 2 minutes later, the police were responding to a 911 call because she was outside on the ground. Now do the math. So you're probably thinking, well, she must have, she hung up her friend's phone and she just jumped. She hung up the phone, she dropped it on the balcony, she jumped. First question you should have is, where's the phone? What did she do with the phone? I asked the police that 3 different times. 3 times. They sidestepped me every time until this morning. They sidestepped me because they hadn't thought about it, because they rushed to judgment. They finally answered the question this morning. And you know what they said to me this morning? And they said it, and they didn't even realize what they were telling me because they're so sloppy. I made them put it in writing. I have it here. I'll read it to you. Austin Police Department did not find the phone on Miss Aguilera. Miss Aguilera returned the phone to its owner before she was seen going onto the balcony. Now, how is that possible? That is 180 degrees different than what you told us previous. That is absolutely contrary to what you told us previous. Previous, you said the 3 women were asleep. You said they didn't know where she went. But then when I asked the one question over and over and you had to answer it, then all of a sudden we realized if she did in fact use her friend's phone like they claim, if she did in fact use it for 1 minute and was found already 2 minutes later by a passerby and the police were already responding to a 911 call, think about that, what the ramifications of that are. That whoever phone she was using was standing right next to her as she went over the balcony, if she went over the balcony. Now you're saying to yourselves, well, shoot, there's got to be a reasonable explanation. We should talk to the witnesses. We should investigate. We should figure this out. That's what we're saying. Now you're getting it. You sat there, and with all due respect, you all, I watched it. You all sat there, and you had this corporal, or whatever he is, lead detective, and Mrs. Rodriguez will tell you how he is and her interactions with him in just one moment. But you let him stand at a podium just like this and feed you total baloney. And all you had to do is say, wait a minute, detective, wait a minute. She borrowed somebody's phone. Where is that phone? Maybe she must have went over the railing with it. She had to give somebody. No, according to him, she returned it to its owner before she was seen walking back out to the balcony. Absolutely impossible. Very suspicious. We have a problem. And I shouldn't have to ask the detective 3 times the same question, should I? I shouldn't have to do that. But I did it, and I'm going to keep doing it. And another thing, why would you tell these kids, the boyfriend who Stephanie knows, who's been over to her house, who her daughter has been dating, they're in love, why would you, detective, tell him not to speak to Stephanie Rodriguez? Don't talk to her. What kind of foolishness is that? Just absolute insensitive and inhumane in my view. Before I go any further, I'm getting a little incensed here. Let me introduce to you Stephanie Rodriguez. She wants to read to you a statement, and I hope you'll give her your full attention.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Rodriguez, and I'm the mother of Brianna Aguilera. Brianna was a driven, disciplined, and caring person. She was beautiful. She was a loving daughter, a protective big sister, and a caring granddaughter. A second mom to her 2 younger brothers. Her baby was her little Yorkie, Ava. All of us were her best friend. She made everyone around her feel loved and supported. I considered her my best friend, not just a mother-daughter relationship. We talked every day, and she would tell me everything. I miss her so much. Her brothers miss her too. Her father and grandmother miss her so much, and so do all her friends. Brianna grew up as an all-star cheerleader, an incredible athlete. She was an honor student and a member of the National Honor Society all throughout school. Christmas was her favorite time of year. She loved decorating, baking, and hiding the elf on the shelf for her little brother. Her brothers already miss her so much. Brianna graduated magna cum laude from high school. She was accepted to many colleges, but chose Texas A&M. She was studying political science and criminal justice. She was not like most young girls. She loved writing more than watching TV. Her favorite class at A&M were her creative writing classes. She dreamed of attending law school in New York and wanted to become a criminal defense lawyer. She was so smart and had such a bright future. She dreamt of a life of where she could make a difference. My daughter was not suicidal. I know my daughter better than anyone. We spoke every day. I spoke to her on the 25th, the 26th, and the 27th. Even the morning of the 28th, she was not suicidal. To the Austin police, I can deal with you being annoyed each time I called or tried to talk to you. I can deal with how arrogantly you talked down to us each time we talked. I can deal with you telling my daughter's friends not to talk to me like I am some sort of criminal. But I cannot deal with you doing a news conference and saying false things about my child without a thorough investigation. I cannot deal with you jumping to conclusions and not performing an actual investigation. I cannot deal with your failure to do your job. Do your job.
The police, as much as I've always been a supporter of the police, with all due respect to them, do not determine cause of death. That's not their job. Their job, that job, is specifically reserved for the medical examiner's office. If there is no medical examiner in the county, then it's the JP in the county. In Austin, it's the job of the medical examiner to determine cause of death, not Detective Robert Marshall. The medical examiner told us that a rape kit was done and the autopsy will be performed. It'll take us 60 to 90 days. So that begs the question, why did Detective Robert Marshall tell us that they had reached their conclusion and that the investigation was complete? Doesn't work that way. How is it that Robert Marshall has determined the cause of this young woman's death? He doesn't have that authority. His job is to question all the witnesses, We've already offered up several. We'll offer up several more for him to do his job. Hopefully a different investigator will be involved. There are many questions about what was done here, about what happened on that night. And it's already going to be incredibly difficult for the Austin Police Department to conduct an objective investigation at this point. And that's because the way that the Austin Police Department has handled this and jumped to conclusions within hours of this tragedy disqualifies the Austin Police Department from further investigation of this matter. So, I'm doing this today. I'm calling on the Austin Police Department to reopen the investigation with a different investigator, to reassign Robert Marshall and put this in the hands of a different investigator. Failing that, I will be calling on the governor to engage the Texas Rangers. We will submit a formal packet to them with all the evidence we have gathered so far, and we will gather. We intend to present 30 to 40 pages of information, statements, and other factual data that they need to do a proper investigation. And here are the questions I hope are answered. Austin Police Department, why would you close your investigation without having all the facts? Why not wait for the autopsy results? Why not wait for the rape kit result? And who would you send it to if you've already made up your mind? Why not question all the witnesses, the ones that we've questioned? The young man who was down on the ground, who heard somebody say, "Get off of me," or the young lady and her family across the hall who heard running, screaming, and, quote, something bad had happened. Why not question them? Why not examine all the phones of the friend group? We asked that question in the Zoom call. You know what we were told? We don't have the power to look at their phones. Hogwash. Hogwash. You have that power. And you need to do it. Why hold a hasty press conference to announce that this young lady had killed herself without even talking to her mother to see what her affect was leading up to the 28th? You heard what she said. She knows her daughter. She knows her daughter more than anyone. Why not talk to the friends immediately? Why wait? Why wait to talk to her friend group? Why not talk to them immediately? Why did you let the owner of the apartment, that is the young woman who was leasing the apartment, vacate the apartment? Literally vacate the apartment and leave town. Why won't the boyfriend talk to us? The boyfriend that was a longtime boyfriend of this young lady and was very friendly with her mother. Why can't we see the texts? Why can't we see the phones? Where is her wallet? Where is Brianna's wallet? It's missing. They didn't tell you that, did they? I see you writing. They didn't tell you that, did you? If you had asked the question, they would have told you that. They told you what they wanted you to hear. They didn't tell you the complete facts. Her wallet is missing. Why did her friends wait until 12:14 the next day to report her missing? If she had borrowed the phone and returned it the night of, 2 minutes before she jumped her death. Why didn't they examine the balcony? Why didn't they examine the railing? Why didn't they see if there was some sort of table there, a chair there that somebody who's 5'2" would have to step on to get over the railing? Why didn't they look for scuff marks? Why didn't they do anything? They didn't even bother to look to whether if somebody did in fact jump off the balcony, whether they would end up in the tree that's 30 some odd foot forward of the apartment. Y'all didn't ask that question either. The laws of physics aren't different in the city of Austin, you realize. The same laws of physics as exist here in Houston. If, when the phone call came in at 12:46 and the officers responded to the 911 call, if it was so obvious that this young woman had fallen to her death, why was it till 6 o'clock, 5 hours later, that they ever went into the apartment complex? If it was so obvious that that's how she had died. These are the questions you should be asking. At the press conference, you didn't ask any questions. You didn't ask any questions. You just lapped it up like it was cool water and you were very thirsty. Very disappointing to me. So, we have given you a lot of information. We're going to submit a packet. I'm going to call on the governor to... I don't expect, based on the conduct I saw from the police chief of Austin, her defensive manner that she approached the podium yesterday, I don't expect any relief from her. I don't expect she's going to say, King's X, oh, you're right, this was sloppy, it was not thorough, it was kind of embarrassing, we're going to get a different detective to start over. I don't expect that to happen. I expect what's going to happen is I'm going to send a formal letter to the governor asking for the Texas Rangers to be engaged. And I'm going to submit a detailed packet to the governor's office and ultimately to the Texas Rangers to actually do an investigation to figure out what actually happened, because we still don't know. Notice I haven't suggested to you what happened, because I don't know. I'm starting to get a sneaking suspicion. So I've given you a lot of information. So what is your headline? Your headline is this. There are serious and disturbing questions raised with regard to the Austin Police Department's handling of the investigation surrounding the death of Brianna Aguilera. The Texas Rangers have now been called to intervene. Thank you very much. Let's go.
How long are you willing to give APD to reassign an investigator?
That takes 2 minutes. That's what I expect. Let's go.
So let's unpack what we just found out from Tony Busby. And in the Austin Police Department's press conference, they did mention an altercation, some sort of fight with another female. They said it wasn't physical, that the only physical altercation they knew of was her friends were trying to get her out of that tailgate, and she swung on one of her friends, may have hit one of her friends, something like that. Tony Busby also brought that up, and he said it was not investigated the day of her death. The other female was actually in the apartment with her, the same one she got in the argument with. And some reports have come out that allege what that fight was about. I'll tell you about that a little bit later, but he brought that up, and that is concerning. Now, that's not saying that this girl, obviously no one knows if that girl had anything to do with it or not, and I'm not saying she did, but they definitely got in some sort of altercation, and that girl was definitely in the same apartment with her when all this went down. Even more intriguing than that is Tony Busby also brought up that a male posted on TikTok who lived in that high-rise that he could hear fighting and screaming coming from above him, which he lived, I don't know how many floors below where this went down, but it couldn't have been too far down. And the police never even interviewed this guy, never talked to him, even though he had some pretty damning claims that he posted on TikTok. Now, Tony Busby talked to him, but the police didn't. Now, I happen to have that TikTok and what he said on that TikTok, and here's what that sounded like.
From what I heard, it sounded like somebody was being taken advantage of, and there was a party going on around her, and like nobody cared. I walk around the corner, I get on Rio Grande, I hear a girl saying, "Get the fuck off me! Get the fuck off of me! Get the..." And then it was like a muffled like scream at the top of her lungs. It was like almost as if, like, you know that sound when like somebody put a pillow or something over your mouth? That's what I heard.
Why would that not be investigated, folks? Why would police not even talk to this guy? You got to ask yourself that question. Also mentioned by Tony Busby, the apartment across from where Brianna allegedly jumped to her death, those people said they heard fighting. That girl was not interviewed, nor were the other people in her apartment. And apparently it was like an entire family living in that apartment, and none of those people were interviewed either. We found out about an anonymous message that was sent to police alleging Brianna was locked out on that balcony. I don't really know, obviously, to what extent that means. Did they get pissed at Brianna because she was drunk and locked her out on the balcony? Was it a big fight and they locked her out on the balcony? I don't know, but he mentioned it, and I would imagine we're going to find out more at some point about that. Another thing Tony mentioned and brought up was the phone that she used, her friend's phone, to call her boyfriend and the timing of that. And he really pressed that point because he said police were not very forthcoming because it doesn't fit their narrative, is essentially what Tony Busby is saying. What their timeline said is that all of her friends went to sleep and that they woke up, she wasn't there. She was gone. Tony Busby's point is, okay, but she used one of those friends' cell phone. She talked to her boyfriend, and then 2 minutes later, they know is when she jumped from that building, according to the police timeline. And his question was, where was the phone? Well, when police answered him eventually, he said it took 3 times to get an answer. The detective said, well, she gave it back to the girl she borrowed it from after she was done talking to her boyfriend. And that's when Tony Busby was like, wait, hold the fucking phone. Because you told me already that they were all asleep. Well, if she jumped off the building 2 minutes after she gave the phone back, that person for sure wasn't asleep. So that's totally contradictory to what you just said. You heard it. I'm not going to repeat everything he said. You heard it, but it does raise probably the biggest question in this case so far. Tony Busby said that the detective did not even speak to her mother to get her state of mind. And I mean, Brianna's state of mind in all this. Didn't even talk to her. Now, supposedly there was an attempt to call her mother, and when the detective talked to the mother, she was told he can speak to her attorney. But that wasn't the day that all this went down. That was several days after. Why was she not interviewed by the detective that same day? Only he can answer that, but it is questionable because you want to get a state of mind. Was your daughter suicidal? That would be a question you want to ask right off the bat. Now, some questions have also been brought up, and Tony Busby even raised this question that the apartment was completely vacated. Like, all these people split, man. Apparently, the person that owned the apartment, or not owned it, but rented the apartment, completely packed her shit and left and never came back. Now, that I can kind of get. I mean, if you believe that one of your friends jumped off the balcony of your apartment, you probably just want to get the hell out of there and never come back. That's pretty traumatic. So I kind of get that. That is not as big a smoking gun, if you will, as other things in this case that raise questions. Another thing that he brought up, her wallet was missing, and that's why it took so long. Look, police didn't even identify Brianna until her friends called 911 and reported her missing, and they started doing some digging and figured out that that was the same girl that was at the bottom of that building. Her wallet was missing. She had no ID. And Tony Busby also brought up the questions of why the friends waited till the next day to report this. Certainly that's questionable. And another thing that he brought up that we didn't know prior to Tony Busby's press conference was there was a tree that was located below where she jumped. And look, there's a lot of math out there that these geniuses can do with trigonometry and everything like that, where they can actually figure out if you jumped from this building, how far out would you go or how far in would you go before you hit the ground. And what Tony Busby is alluding to here is there was a tree below where she jumped that she could not have possibly jumped far enough out to avoid hitting that tree, but yet there were no broken branches or anything like that as it relates to this tree. And that is a question, and they'll do hopefully some more investigation on that and see where her body was in relation to where science would say her body was. And then he brought up the big one, which was activating the Texas Rangers. Texas Rangers, no joke. Most of y'all listening are familiar with them. They are experts at investigation And so activating them to investigate this, which the governor would have to do, I would definitely do that because this is a political emergency right now. Like, I'll talk about that in a minute, but you better get your shit together because the entire country is looking at this right now, state of Texas. Another thing that Tony Busby brought up, no suicide note like the police had said. As a matter of fact, he said she was in a creative writing class, and that was a term paper in her creative writing class. If that is the truth, man, that makes that detective look like a total bumbling idiot, if that is the truth. Because you went out and told the whole world that she had a suicide note and it was a dadgum term paper? Unbelievable. He also brought up the suicidal comments that police brought up in their press conference, and he said that was all hyperbole. Basically, she was joking. It's something you say out of frustration when you're aggravated about something. Yeah, you know, people will go around and they'll make a comment. He even used his own example. But for example, if just you have a whole week of everything going wrong in your life and you say, man, I might as well just jump off a bridge. You don't mean it. You're saying it in hyperbole. And that's what he's saying she said to one of her friends. It was not a serious comment. It was in response to just some things that were stressing her at the time. And another thing that he really hyper focused on, and something obviously that he has a major problem with, is the cause of death determination made by the detective. You heard him. It's not the detective's job to determine cause of death. Look, here's the facts. I have no doubt there was a rush to judgment here. This detective basically made that determination of suicide within minutes. And in my view only, the investigation was sloppy. It was lazy. It was rushed. And they didn't foresee the shit show that was coming. Now, does this mean she did not commit suicide? I don't know. I would say, in my opinion, that would be surprising if she did. I can tell you there's a lot of questions that need some answers, and some other things that I discovered incidentally. Brianna was afraid of heights. Kind of a strange choice to kill yourself by jumping 17 stories when you're afraid of heights. That, according to her mother. Mother said she wouldn't even ride roller coasters that were, I don't know, of any sort, because of the fact that, you know, typically they go high up in the air. She was scared to death of that, according to her mother. Also, another thing that bothers me about this case is she did this with other people around. She was not alone. And that's rare. It happens, but it's rare. And then another thing that bothered me is people are questioning her mental health. Certain people out there. Her mother, get this, is a nurse practitioner, practically a doctor. There's slight things that doctors can do that nurse practitioners cannot, but they're very highly educated. They make very good money. And not only is she a nurse practitioner, she's a nurse practitioner at a psychiatric clinic. If anybody can determine whether her daughter has mental stability issues or mental health issues, it's her mother, who knows her better than anybody. And she is saying, and has been continuing to say since this happened, there is no way her daughter did that. Her daughter was happy. She was not depressed. And this lady is trained to spot mental illness. Yet, as close as they were, she saw no signs of this with Brianna. So that's questionable that they would make that determination. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. If she was totally shit-faced drunk, your decision-making, way off when you're drunk. I'm sure most of the people listening to this have had 1 or 10 too many, just like I have in my life. And there are a lot of things I've done when I've had 10 too many that I wouldn't do sober. Not saying that's what happened, but alcohol does affect things. The problem is we don't even know the results of how drunk she was yet, or if she was even drunk. And think about this. Austin police respond to basically a Good Samaritan's report of an unconscious woman outside of those high-rise apartments. The woman gets pronounced dead at 12:57 a.m., and it's not till 4 p.m. that afternoon that Stephanie Rodriguez is told that her daughter is dead. Officers told her two different things, according to Stephanie Rodriguez. They first told her Brianna jumped, and then followed that up with her friends don't know how Brianna ended up 17 stories below on the ground of those apartments. Conflicting statements. One thing that I was told in the past from a pretty good detective was the truth never changes. So hopefully we'll be getting to what the truth is in this case. And I told you about that fight with Brianna and another individual, one of her friends, and what's allegedly coming out as to how it started, allegedly, was this friend of Brianna's was sweet on Brianna's boyfriend, and Brianna was at this tailgate. Another guy had his arm around Brianna, not necessarily in a romantic way, but if you're the boyfriend, it wouldn't look great. And supposedly this friend took a picture of that and texted it to the boyfriend in an effort to kind of destroy their relationship. And that's what kicked off this giant shit show. I don't know if that's true or not, but that is coming out in some reports of some people very close to Brianna who had access to her phone after all of this went down. There were some questions about how did that phone go missing. According to the police, she was drunk and lost her phone. She stumbled off into those woods near that tailgate, and that's where her phone was found. We're going to find out much more about this, but this is what we got right now. So there you have it. Just an unbelievable amount of questions in this case out of Texas. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. What do you think? With the information that you know now, do you think this needs to be investigated further? I do. Will police come up with the same result? Maybe. But I'll be honest, it would surprise me because there's just nothing here that I've seen so far that would point to this girl deciding to jump 17 stories from a building when you're preparing for your whole life outside of that. So we'll see. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon, commercial-free early releases, bonus episodes, all kinds of benefits. Patreon.com/exposed podcast files. And incidentally, if you are a current Patreon member of the top tier level, I got a surprise for you. Your first quarter gift, I typically ship those out in January. Your first quarter gift is going to go out a little bit early. I'm actually going to ship it out next week, and or it might be even by the end of this week. And there's a reason for that. It relates to holiday month, and you are going to love it. I'm excited about it. I think it's a really cool gift that I'm going to send you. So look forward to that. And right now it's December 7th when I'm recording this. If you're not currently a Patreon top tier member, that's our global celebrities, and you join between now and when I go to ship them gifts out, which probably will be Wednesday of this week. If you join the top tier, I'm going to go ahead. I don't typically send those out until you've been a member for at least 3 months. I'm going to go ahead and send you that first quarter gift as well. And I think y'all are going to like them. Let me know what you think when you get them. Until next time, for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.